A common type of writing that students have to do on some standardized tests is generate a narrative story in response to reading. And so this brings about a whole host of questions. What kinds of prompts or responses might they be asked to do? And what does evidence look like in such responses? Well, let me start just with a quick answer to the type of narratives they might have to generate. Pop on over to our website, and if you just search narrative responses, we should find the article I'm referencing. Yep, here we go. Okay, there are really kind of four big types of narratives they might have to write after reading. And they're listed here, and this article will give you some background, like rewrite the story from a different perspective, continue the story, those kinds of things. So you can read about that. But Deborah Pollum from East Allen Schools in the Fort Wayne area, she asked about the evidence piece because we're writing a story, so we don't want them to say, according to the passage, or one detail from their reading, because it's a story with characters and a setting and a plot. So how do you demonstrate textual evidence if not that way? Well, Deborah, you're absolutely right, and it is kind of a unique approach. Okay, so let me start first by just defining what counts as evidence in a narrative response. And the secret, the important thing to remember is kids have to demonstrate comprehension. They read this previous piece or pieces, passages, and now they're going to use that information to write a story. So that the way you demonstrate comprehension is by repeating details. Literally, in your response, you should have characters repeated. If you're rewriting it from another perspective, it's the exact same characters in the exact same setting with the exact same problem. And so the notion is you're just repeating what you picked up on. Now we're just writing it from a different vantage point, viewpoint, perspective. If we're continuing the story, then we have to make sure that, again, we have the same characters in a similar setting with a similar problem. And so we want to make sure that the defined evidence is clearly explained to students as repeated details. Anything you can repeat about characters, setting, problem, solution, anything like that that you can reference in your rewrite, that counts as evidence. Now, to do that, what we need to make sure kids are doing is comprehending the first one. So I'm going to just show you two quick note-taking tools that eventually kids shouldn't need these. They should be able to hold this thinking in their head, but it might be something as your first scaffolding and teaching you want to share with students. So if we are rewriting the story from a different point of view, if we are continuing the story, if we are inserting a missing piece to the story, anything that really plays off of the original literature they read, then what I want them to do is be very clear while reading that original text. Who are the characters? What are their names? What do we know about them? What setting does this all happen in? What is the basic problem and how does it get solved? Why? Because in my rewrite, I want to make sure that I'm referencing the same characters in the same setting with a similar problem and how it gets solved. And so again, the more you use again, the better. Okay, however, there's this really unique type of narrative response based on nonfiction reading. Yeah, that's a different organizer. Same setup, different facets. Now they are going to write a fictional story based on facts they picked up on in the original informational text they read, or texts, plural. Give you a quick example. That's in some of the repositories that you can reference. You read all about the Grand Canyon, okay? And now they have to write a story about a trip to the Grand Canyon and what it was like using details from the original text, the nonfiction text you read. So what I want them to do while reading the original text is make note of anything you know about the subject matter, Grand Canyon, any facts, any details, any people, types of people, characters. Yeah, these will become the characters. They will have similar traits, similar problems, similar situations, that kind of a thing. What did you pick up about the Grand Canyon in terms of its setting? What does it look like? Temperature, weather, what about sensory details? All of those kinds of things. All of those facts are fair game to be in your setting, in your story that you write. Okay, and how about problems, situations, conflicts that people who visit the Grand Canyon face that you learn from the nonfiction text? Make note of any of those. Why? Because that's good fodder for your stories, conflict or problem and solutions. So the secret is kids have to be able to collect information pulled from the original text and know that they're referencing it, literally repeating it in their own narrative response. One final thing, after you teach this to kids and you're actually having them kind of practice this, one of the best ways for students to self-assess if they have enough evidence from the reading in their revision, in their own story, is I will have them highlight with a highlighter or just digitally highlight on the computer, highlight every detail in your own story that you pulled from an original text. We need to have a lot of highlights, right? We have to prove we read and understood the original text. So we should have a lot of highlights, and then all together it should create characters in a setting with a problem that gets resolved.